So I was trying to figure out how I feel about this church. I woke up this morning and I really did this assessment. I said, it's Sunday morning, 6:30. I'm gonna get all dressed up super nice for you all. I'm gonna come here, I'm gonna be part of the morning, I'm gonna be here all day. Do I really like Eastwind as a community, right? That's kind of the question rolling through my head. Maybe a dangerous question to ask. But then I was thinking about it, I love this church community. Absolutely love it. I thought about the 30 or 40 people who got up early, prepared this day for you. They're in the kids' classrooms right now. They're brewing coffee early this morning. They're serving at the doors or around here, in the band or in places you won't even see. And it really struck me. I'm like, well, one of the things that makes it easy to be part of the Eastwind community is there's so many other people that are so passionate about like creating a space where we can encounter God. And then I started to rewind and I thought, okay, so what brings you here today? They're like, why are you in church this morning? Okay, what happened to bring you here? Maybe it's in your rhythm. This is what I do. It's part of my faith and the community I'm part of. Maybe it's you're figuring things out and you're balancing that. Like sometimes we go, sometimes we don't. Or maybe you're here like looking for answers, that type of dynamic. I thought, okay, for me, it started with this picture. That picture's from 4 years ago. In April, my family, minus one of my kids who was off at college, sent that picture with my dog to the Eastwind Board and Search Committee. And we said, yes, we're joining the Eastwind community as the pastor here. And we were living in California at the time. That was our little way of saying we're in. That's actually a map of Idaho underneath. I'm not that artistic, so I didn't really pull it off. But we left a community we were embedded with and we raised our kids in and we were connected. And we set out on this great adventure to come be part of something here. 4 years ago, and Emily and I absolutely love this church. And the reason I say that is, so what is it then? I mean, what is it about it that draws us back to this space and that I wake up on a Sunday and I'm really excited? And so today's, I'm gonna call it this whole series is a This Is a Football kind of series. Did anybody bring a football today? You're the best, Mike. We did it. You threw it in the lights that time. Mike was the head of the search committee. How wild is that? But three years ago, Mike threw me a football up here, and I caught it. So I still got it. He still got it. Right? We still got it. Here, Vince Lombardi. Some of you who know the history of football. Vince Lombardi, the Lombardi Trophy, is the trophy given to the Super Bowl winner. Legend is that in 1961, Lombardi his professional team came and sat in front of him. The best football players in the world, ready to vie for their spot in history. And he held up a football, and he said, "Gentlemen, this is a football." And they kind of looked at him quizzically. He went on to explain that greatness comes from mastering the fundamentals. Those of you who love basketball, John Wooden, the same with when he would bring his players in and say, this is how you lace up your shoes. And so We Are the Church is going to be a series where we just explore, going back to, for 3 weeks, the fundamentals of the Eastwind community and how we tie into the larger church and the history of the church. And so the whole time you can have in your mind, what's going on here? Like we've been in this Sermon on the Mount series. We're exploring how to follow Jesus, how to be with him, how to be like him, how to do what he would do if he were us. We've taken this break, actually. Each May, we take a break and we pause and we go, who are we? What's our football? How does it work? What are our fundamentals? And so we're going to explore that. Now, maybe to give you a picture of the influence of this, I'm a Hoosiers kid. I grew up in that era of sports movies. And I'll tell you what, this was an iconic moment. After watching this moment, I was like, I can go to anywhere in the world and win because of this reason.
Buddy, hold this into the backboard. What is it? 15 feet.
15 feet. Put Ollie on your shoulders.
Measure this from the rim. Buddy?
How far?
10 feet.
10 feet. I think you'll find it's exact same measurements as our gym back in Hickory.
So there's this idea that understanding the fundamentals, committing ourselves to the fundamentals is one of the, stacking on top of the fundamentals repeatedly is one of the places that like great experiences and great practices can come from. So the football talk for us is going to be around Eastwind, about us as a church. What is our football? What does it look like? And I want to start with your first question, do a few questions on a morning. So this is an all play. You might have grown up like you can remember when you were an infant and your eyes opened and you were like, I'm in church, and you just remember that, all right? Others of you, maybe you're like, actually, this is my third time ever or first time ever, and I'm still not sure what to expect right now. But what would you say? I mean, you've seen enough movies, right? You've watched enough headlines. You can answer the question. What do you think the fundamentals of the church are? Maybe come up with a fundamental. What's a fundamental of the church? You get a minute, share your ideas. We're going to come back and we'll spend the rest of the morning talking about what are our fundamentals of Eastwood. All right, so take a minute. Hopefully you got one of your fundamentals out there. Take 10 seconds. So you know what? So I was talking to someone the other day, and they were like, they had been new to church about a year ago, and their life is completely turned around, and they said, you know, this community has just anchored my life. And I was about to pull one of those, like, because they were about to say, your sermons are so good. I was about to pull one of those, it's not me, all glory goes to God. And then they didn't even mention my messages. They talked about, they said, you know what, my family, my kids, they said my kids have gotten connected and we love the people that love them, and they've been inviting their friends, and they actually got into a life group. And they said, we never knew we could be in a community where we gather and we connect and we care for one another. They were going down this list of things, and I'm like, and I kept waiting for them to be like, and every Sunday, your message is amazing. And it never came out of their mouth. And initially I was sulked internally, never externally. I sulked internally, and then I was like, wait, that's it. That's what we want. That's what we believe, that there's this movement, all these connected parts can draw together. And collectively, they can be something good in our lives. And I realized that the reason, I would say Eastwind works as a community. And the reason it works is because God is faithful, and you believe that. When I say you, most of you have encountered that, and you believe that, and you live that out. And what that practically turns and looks like is a group, it's this inspired community. It's a group of folks who are like, we're all in on this, and they engage in the mission, and they embrace the vision. So today we're going to refresh on the mission, the vision, how we live that out. It will be a radical change from the Sermon on the Mount series, where we've been going through Jesus' teaching sentence by sentence by sentence. But, 30 years ago, roughly, the founding pastor of Eastwind Community Church, his name was Mark Traylor. Mark had come up from the Bay Area, and he knocked on some doors, and he and a small gathering of people met at the Barber Park Pavilion. And they said, so this is Southeast Boise. If you live on this side of town, you know there are not a lot of churches on this side of town. And they said, we want to be on the south and the east side, and let's bring a church into existence. Let's create a church that's a place where those who have never been to church, those who have been hurt by church, those who aren't sure what to expect, they come and go. Those who love Jesus and love their church, let's create a place where you can grow in your faith, and you can also freely come in and discover who Jesus is. And they said, let's be a church for the unchurched. It was 30 years ago that journey started, and I thought that's a great place for us to take on our first fundamental. And the fundamental comes from Jesus, as they all should. Jesus is talking to his followers. The church doesn't yet exist. So we're going to kind of look at someone else's history today and see how it becomes our present as we walk through it. So Jesus is resurrected. This is post-Easter. He has revealed himself to his followers who had lost all hope, who were discouraged and living in darkness, and they were waiting for their door to be kicked down and themselves to be dragged off. And then the opposite happened. Jesus overcame death, resurrected from the dead. And he came to them. He said, that kingdom I've been talking about, that kingdom we've been studying about in the Sermon on the Mount, that kingdom is here, and I'm the king. And then he told all of his followers to meet him at a certain spot. He's like, let's connect over there. And this is how it's described in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 28. He says, then the 11 disciples, so the followers of Jesus minus Judas, the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain where Jesus had told them to go. So there's a little bit of history, right? When they saw him, look what they did. They worshiped him. This is a small detail. To us, we're like, yeah, of course, it's the Bible, it's God. That's what they do. But to this audience of like faithful Jewish men, to record that they worshiped another man illustrates who Jesus is, that he's not man, he's God. And they worship him. But look at that next sentence, or that next statement. They worshiped him, but some doubted him. This is the core crew. This is not like someone who's wondering who Jesus is. It is the core crew, and some of them doubted him. And I love the honesty, because again, I've always thought if I'm going to write certain parts of the Bible, I'm going to weave out a lot of the doubt stuff, the questioning stuff. I'm just going to make it like onward and upward, right? And then this happens. Amongst this worshiping, doubting group of people, Jesus says these profound, fundamental, this is a football. You cannot play this game without this ball. This is what he says. He says, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore, go and make disciples. Disciple is a word that means, the best technical term is apprentice. We don't use that term a lot, but I think most of us in a working field know there's apprentices, almost like intern in a sense, but more intentional than an intern, because some of you have interns and you put them in the corner, you don't teach them how to do anything. So it's a little better than that, okay? This is a follower, someone who follows the way of Jesus. He says, look, all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. All of it. And so what do you do when you have all the authority? Well, he says, here's what I'm doing with it. I'm giving it to you. I'm giving it to you with a purpose, that you would go and you would make followers, apprentices. You would baptize them in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, and you would teach them to obey everything that I have commanded you. But he continues, he's got one more sentence, and I think this sentence is so important because I do believe there's a little cause effect here. Then he says, and surely I am with you always, even to the end of the age. Well, so what's the cause effect? Well, he just said, all authority has been given to me. I'm giving it to you. I want you to go and I want you to share about the kingdom. I want you to share about the king. I want you to invite people to follow the way. That's what you're going to do. I want you to go at this. We didn't know what it was yet, but start these ecclesias, or these churches, groups of people who do this. So you're going to go do this, but so if that's a cause, look at the effect. And as you do this, as you're on mission with me, you're going to encounter that I'm on mission with you. Now, I don't want to say this too strongly because you could definitely challenge me on it, but I've seen it anecdotally as very real. You can do all the stuff. You can believe all the stuff. You can show up at church regularly, every week even. You can serve in kid mission. You can read your Bible every day, and you can have an active prayer life. You can do all these disciplines and traditional Christian practices. But Jesus didn't say, all authority on heaven and earth has been given to me. So go to church, read your Bible, pray. He said, go make, it's a life-on-life interaction. You're to go engage with other people about who I am and what I've done. I'm with you. And surely what you'll encounter when I do that is that I'm with you. And I've wondered sometimes if the distance we feel from God is partially tied to a tendency to ignore this. The good news is, we're not the first ones. The first ones were the 11 people on the hill. And we're going to get into these guys a little bit and kind of see what happened with them. If Jesus says, if you're on mission with me, I'm on mission, this is what you're going to encounter is we're connected and we're doing this together. But they didn't go. That's the thing. They didn't go. They went back to Jerusalem and they started the ecclesia, the church, the community, the gathering. They started it and they just loved Jesus and they loved each other and they went to temple and they practiced being something called Jewish Christians. They were still Jewish, and they were this sect of Judaism called Christianity. And so when we think about that, it wasn't until like 10, 15 years later that those words of Jesus actually got off the ground. So we're going to look at the history of how that happened today. And looking at that history, I don't know, I think this is a useful story. Okay, some of you know it, but it's the idea of Jesus is fundamentally looking and saying, here's the deal, okay? People are waiting to hear this good news. People want, the systems of this world, the kingdoms of this world, they always run up short. They just do. If everything else works, death confronts it, and we all know that. The systems don't have an answer for that. Okay? So he goes, you're going to go, you're going to invite people that this is the answer. I'm the way. I'm the truth. I'm the life. And it makes me think about, it's an old story, but there's like two shoe salesmen, right? They go to some, people who've never had shoes and need shoes. Like these shoes, they're zero drop, don't worry. They're not going to mess with their arch or anything like that. And they go, and the first shoe salesman looks around and he sees no shoes. And he's like, this is a horrible situation. You sent me all the way here and there's literally no one has shoes. Bring me home. And the other one, he says, this is the best situation ever. You sent me all the way here. I looked around and literally no one has shoes. Greatest opportunity ever. And there's a few ways we can look at this as we walk through this and we explore it. But I want to say, I'm with the second shoe salesman because I used to not be there. Somebody shared the hope of Christ with me. And over time and over a few years, over some intentionality on my part, I found the King and I found the kingdom. I've spent the rest of my life living in that kingdom and trying to practice the way of Jesus. And so Eastwind talks about this journey this way. We'd say that our mission is to inspire each other to follow Jesus and deepen our faith and relationship with him. Just 3 words to help you use this stick: inspire, follow, deepen. We believe we need to be shook out of whatever we're in and brought towards Jesus. And the reason is to follow him in everything, but also to grow deep in that following, to become like him, to find that the thing that marks our life more than anything is the time we've spent with Jesus throughout our lives. That's our mission. That's how we talk about it. So let's go back into history 2,000 years and let's see how we got to this whole movement in the church and how this whole thing unfolded. So remember, Jesus invites his followers. He says, all authority has been given to me. Now go. Now we have Peter. Here's the situation. We're going to really kind of dig into Peter and explore Peter because Peter is a foundational character in the story of the church. Peter's hanging out in Jerusalem. It's been 10 years. Jesus said, go. And it got so bad that at some point the father was like, hey, Jesus, so this isn't accurate, by the way, I'm making this up. But he said, the guys you chose, they didn't go. And Jesus is like, give them a little more time. God's like, no, I got someone in mind. Jesus says, who do you have in mind? He goes, well, do you know Saul of Tarsus, Paul? And Jesus is like, wait, the guy who's arresting and killing all of the followers? And God's like, yeah, but he's really good at going. So let's invite him to be part of this program. Let's invite him into the authority. So Saul is on his way to arrest more Christians because he got all the ones in Jerusalem he could find. He's on his way to Damascus. And in that moment, Jesus shows up to him. He's like, Saul. So the original crew didn't do it. I need you to understand that what you're looking for, it's me. Your passion for truth is misplaced. It's in me. And right there, Saul, we know him as Paul. He didn't get a name change. It's just different language, different translations. Saul becomes Paul the Apostle. And about a decade later, because he takes time to grow up and learn, about a decade later, he launches out and plants churches all over the Mediterranean. They become the foundation of the churches that spread around the world. But this is not his story today. We're going to stick with Peter's story. So Peter's hanging out in Jerusalem. He's in the surrounding neighborhoods and he's up on a hill, up on a rooftop, taking a nap, beautiful afternoon day. He's enjoying his time there. And then all of a sudden, God sends a dream to him. And in the dream, all this blanket lowers down the sheet and it's got all this delicious food on it. But it's food that Peter can't eat because he's Jewish. None of it's kosher. And God says, Peter, aren't you hungry? He's like, it's like rumbling, tumbling. What do I do right now? And he goes, take and eat. And Peter goes, God, I would never eat anything that you say is unclean. And then there's this head scratch moment. And God goes, that's really interesting because I'm the one who offered it to you. Peter, don't ever say something's unclean if I offer it to you and I say it's clean. Fresh off that, God says, I want you to go to a guy, Cornelius' house. Cornelius is not the normal house you'd hang out in. Cornelius isn't Jewish. He's a Gentile. All the things he does are against your rules. And this is how that story unfolds. Peter goes to Cornelius' house. Like I said, we're going to do this is a football history right now. See where the church came from, right? And he gets to the doorstep. And here's the story. It's Acts chapter 10, verses 27 to 29. If you want to pull that out in the brown Bibles in front of you, if you brought a Bible and you want to follow along, just because I'll skip a few verses so you can kind of see the whole story unfold. Well, while talking to him, Peter, who was on that hillside about a decade earlier when Jesus said go, listen to what Peter says. Peter went inside and found a large gathering of people. And this is one of the best openers in a social setting ever. He said to them, you're well aware it is against our law for a Jew to associate or visit with a Gentile. Now, don't let this context pass over your head too quickly. He's a house guest. you ever had a guest show up and be like, you should know I don't like you or your house? Where's the bathroom? Like, it doesn't unfold like that, right? Like we all know you have to be a little more tact. Peter steps in, he's like, you're well aware. Like, whoa, how lucky you are. Can you believe I'm even here? Wow, like that's his intro to this group of people. Do you know what is on the line? Because I am a faithful follower of God. And as a faithful follower of God, I'd never set foot in a house like yours. It's all stated in that little sentence right there. And I feel like a little bit Peter's awkward and he's uncomfortable because this is not something he knows how to do. Even though Jesus told him to do it, he's never practiced it. So he doesn't know what to do. I mean, he heard Jesus say, all authority has been given to me. Now I give it to you, and here's what you're supposed to do with it. Go and make disciples. Go tell people how beautiful and good it is to follow Jesus. Tell them about the kingdom and tell them about the king. But Peter's not quite there yet because he's going to double down on his approach. So then he continues and he says, oh, but as he's standing there, and I'm pretty sure the audience was like, we're not sure what to do right now. Thank you for coming to our house. And then Peter turns and says, but God has shown me that I should not call anyone impure or unclean. So when I was sent for, so here's the deal. Cornelius' family and friends want to hear about Jesus. And who better to tell them than Peter? So he says, when I was sent for, I came here without raising an objection. Kind of. Remember the sheet came down with the food and Peter was like, never. He said, may I ask why you sent for me? So he doubles down. But God has shown me. Just yesterday I thought you were so unclean and impure. But God has shown me, and now I'm here at your house. How lucky you all are. And I go, here's the tension, right? I grew up in the era where at sporting events, it was not uncommon for both sides of student sections to do this. We've got Spirit, yes we do. We've got Spirit, how about you? Cheer. And Peter's a little bit tied at like, we've got Jesus, yes we do. We've got Jesus, how about you? That's kind of Peter's thing. He's like, and here's what concerns me. If we're not careful, here's what I love about Treasure Valley. The churches are trying to work together to be in partnership. We're all different, but we're trying to work together in this regard. Even like next week, VBS, Vacation Bible School, starts on Monday. It's a partnership between us and Eagle Christian across the street because we want to be in this together, right? But the downside is so often what church becomes is just us, me, saying, we've got Jesus, yes we do. We've got Jesus, how about you? And the other church is like, we've got Jesus, yes we do. We've got Jesus, how about you? And the other church is like, we've got Jesus. And meanwhile, God's like, wait, I told you to go and tell people about me. Great chant, everybody. And it can start to feel like this, just a little video.
2, 3, hey, Ruby Springs! 1, 2, 3, we got Spirit! Yes, we do! We got Spirit! How about you?
For 10 years, the disciples hung out in Jerusalem doing their Jesus cheer. We've got Spirit, yes we do. We've got Spirit, how about you? Today, we have to talk fundamentals because as a church, it can be really easy to just drift towards the inside and start to think like, well, we're Eastwind, we're not that, we're not this, we're not that. We've got Jesus, yes we do. We've got Jesus, how about you? Peter is confronted on this. He's now at Cornelius' house. He's now in the living room. He just told him, lucky you, Peter's visiting. That's his intro, right? And then look, he doesn't figure it out, I don't think, like he figures it out. Maybe I'm not giving him enough respect, but I just think Peter's such a great example for us because look what he does next. Then Peter began to speak, and you're like, yes, Peter, turn the corner. He says, I now realize how true it is that God does not show favoritism. Some things you say out loud, you should keep in your head, all right? He's like, hey, everybody, I've just figured out you're not the pieces of trash I thought you were. So glad that we can all be together. It says, but he accepts from every nation the one who fears him and does what is right. He says, God's doing something. And I used to think just me and my team got to be part of it. But he's waking me up a little bit. It took a few years. But he's waking me up a little bit. There's this guy, Paul. He's working on the side. We don't know what to do with him because we don't agree with him. We're all arguing about it. He goes on, he says, you know the message God sent to the people of Israel, announcing the good news of peace through Jesus Christ, who is Lord of all? And he's starting to get it. And then all of a sudden, the Holy Spirit shows up. The Holy Spirit, a sign of like the life of faith. And the Gentiles sitting in this room, Cornelius, his family and friends, who just got a little bit of a lecture from Peter, all of a sudden they begin to speak in tongues. Now, depending on your church tradition, I don't know fully what's unfolding in this moment, but they recognize it as God is blessing these people. Something's going on here. They've received the Spirit. And then they say, this is amazing. Like here we were in the middle of conversation and the people we didn't think deserved it, the people we didn't think God loved, all of a sudden they're showing evidence that God is also for them. And then the text here, so Luke is recording all of this. Luke is a Gentile. He's not Jewish. Imagine what it was like traveling around with Luke. When they ate, everyone went off to eat over here. Luke had to eat over here because they didn't know quite what to do with Luke. Luke records just what he knows. Look what he says. It says, the circumcised believers who had come with Peter were astonished that the gifts of the Holy Spirit had been poured out even on Gentiles. There's a label for the good Christians here. It's the circumcised believers. Could you imagine if that, like, hey, everybody, like, just, that doesn't work. Some things should stay in my head, I know, but that doesn't work. Like, all of a sudden, they hear them speaking in tongues and praising God, and they're like, what if our categories are wrong? What if our labels and our divisions, what if we missed it? We've been so good at this for 10 years. And then Peter, seeing this, says, surely no one can stand in the way of their being baptized with water, for they've received the Holy Spirit just as we have. And Peter, this begins to revolutionize Peter's life. A few years later, he'll stand before the Council of Jerusalem, the church there, and with Paul at his side, and he'll say, we've misunderstood this. The gospel, the good news, the message of the King and his kingdom, it's for the whole world. We thought it was something special for us. And so Peter will even become an advocate. He'll put his own reputation on the line. And I just want to pause there real quick to just remind us. So we do have, this has been part of the faith from the beginning. That if you have encountered Jesus and you're experiencing that interchange and it's transforming you and you say, I've been transformed. I'm ready for that outward expression of what's been done here. And here's what I always listen for when I talk to people. I'm like, okay, if you show up and you're like, I'd like to get baptized. I mean, I'm not like the gatekeeper of all baptism, but I kind of am at Eastwind because I work here. And if you say, you know what, I'm just messing up over and over and over and over, and I just need to get baptized because maybe that'll help me mess up less. I'm like, I don't think you understand what's happening in baptism. It doesn't help you change something. It's an expression. The grace of God mysteriously is represented that you've been born into a new life. But it doesn't make you problem-free. Or if you show up and you're like, I've been really good. I had that habit and this, and I've kicked them all, and I'm ready to get baptized. I'm like, I'm not sure. It sounds like you're kind of saying you've earned your baptism. What we need to know is, do you understand that Jesus Christ is the way, the truth, and the life? He's the way you come to the Father. Not your good works, not your hopefully less bad works, but through his kindness, his grace, his mercy. And so Peter's there. They're going to baptize these folks. The world's going to turn upside down on its head. And I think, here's why we should talk about this. Because the gravitational pull is always towards the inside. My job, I've been here 4 years, is to maybe resist the gravitational pull. And I hope you'll join me doing it. Here's why I say it's towards the inside. Because I know at least 3 people who walked with Jesus who gave in to the gravitational pull. Their names are James, John, and Peter. All 3 of them did not leave the hillside and do what Jesus said. They went back to what they knew. Because I think we all love change, but not, then when change happens, it's not so great. But we love the idea of change. We want to be on the edge of it. And part of the reason we drift towards the middle is because it's just less pressure. You can feel guilty if you're like, I'm not making disciples. I don't know how to do that at my job. We crunch numbers. What am I supposed to, how do I, and then this guilt can start to filter in on us. And then, it's nice being internal because then we don't have to deal with as much change. And I think one of the realities for church communities, really any community, then there's fewer people who are not our people, and that often feels safe. The more people you know, the more people you connect with, it can feel safe. So what's this What's this football look like? Well, here's where I think Peter had found himself. So let's say this, Jesus came to fill to the full the Old Testament so you can enjoy it forever. And for a good Jewish person, that included a series of laws and practices of faithful living. And Peter's just trying to do that, about 600 of them, right? Peter's trying to live that out. Meanwhile, for 3 years, he's sitting with Jesus. And Peter kind of mistakenly goes, this is great. Like Jesus is adding to all these great things I know about how to follow God. And then Peter's like, I got it. Let's go to Jerusalem. Let's go to church. And, I got it. And Jesus, I think he's dumbfounded. It's like, go see Cornelius, man. Because you need to realize something. I didn't just come to add something. I am something. I'm all of it. I'm the whole thing. You want to know what the law looks like? It's me. Do you want to know what the purpose of the law is? It's love. You want to know what love looks like? It's me. And it's so easy, and we do this. I do this. I've been a Christian for almost 30 years. I got my whole stack of these. I've told you how many times I burned my Led Zeppelin CDs because they didn't belong in here. Jesus did. Peter spent 10 years practicing this. And Jesus just blows his mind and says, I didn't come to add one more new thing. I'm the entire new thing. Paul calls it the mystery. The mystery that the good news would go to all people. And so when I think about this, we'll get a little practical real quick then. So Eastwind Church, what this looks like for us. And I think when we say that the church, a church is a community of Jesus followers who have embraced his mandate to invite more followers. We can't unlink these. You're a wildly invitational community. Many of you were invited here. That's how you showed up. And I'd say you can't unlink those two. You have to be an invitational community. Because Jesus said, go and make disciples, and surely I'm with you as you do that. We're going to keep an invitational approach. And so how do we do that? Well, if you have seen on the wall, or you have, depending on your family or your stage of life, or if you're single, roommate, what you're working through, these are the 5 pillars we lay on like how we do stuff. We say, look, Sundays. So we gather together, we hear teaching, we sing together, we greet in the lobby, we make new relationships, we serve all around the church, our kids are here. This is it's one of our pillars. It's one of the things we pour our lives into, but so are kids and youth. We ask ourselves, what's the faith of the next generation worth? You have to ask yourself that question because it is you drift away from that question. What's the faith of the next generation? What like how much are we willing to pay? If you ask our team, we'd say whatever it takes. Whatever it takes. That we could create a space where, and I see a lot of the next generation in here, but I say a space where the next generation could explore, who is Jesus? Who am I? How do I fit? What does it mean to live faithfully? That we could explore all of that together. Life groups, our communities, like this blows my mind, okay? We have almost 350 people in life groups. That's more people than are in here right now. That'll be about how many people come across this morning. And what I love about that is that's people in community with other people, practicing living out a life of faith. So just and full disclosure, some of you know, we're learning new ways to add and create more space for life groups. This last session, we did a diet life group. It's like, same great flavor, less filling, less calories type scenario. And they met for 4 weeks, and they're having conversation about starting a life group or not. And we're going to keep those kind of things going because we just have to make more space in life groups where we can practice becoming like Jesus in community. Our uplift projects. I mean, I believe so deeply that if Eastern closed its doors, and for a lot of you, that'd just be, all right, well, find another church, or we figure it out. We know how to do this, right? But I sure hope that the schools in Southeast Boise would take a day off and say, today's a bad day, because a church that was on our side, that showed up for us, that understood the complexities and the difficulty of what we do, showed up to encourage us. That Parks and Rec, that our civic organizations, that so many of the good nonprofits around the valley, nonprofits both that are just doing good and those that are doing good in the name of Jesus. We just want to pour like rocket fuel into their work. We call practically, that as uplift, but there's so much more that goes on with that. It's showing up and doing good for the city. We're exploring new ways that we can do that. I know that if we closed our doors, no one would collectively feel that sad, but I dream about it. I dream that Southeast Boise would declare a day of mourning because they lost a friend. Somebody that is here for the neighborhoods, the schools, the commerce, the workplaces, because they would know you and go, why are you such an incredible person to work with? Why are you such an incredible friend to have? And they'd go, Oh, it's because you're a follower of Jesus and you're part of a community that does that. And then serving in the church. And, on a typical morning, about 40 people show up at the first part of the morning, 7:30, 8 o'clock, to make a Sunday happen around here. Midweek people serve facilities teams, the classrooms, which I'll invite you to swing by and see as they're getting wrapped up. There's volunteers been coming around and doing that. It's just a beautiful picture of the life of the church. And those pillars hold up our vision. Here's where it gets wild. Do you want to know what our vision is? This is our vision. This is why I applied to the job at this church. Because to be a church that unchurched people love. Here's why this matters to me, because this was me. If you've never been in this situation, okay, and you've always just known church, you see this and you're like, ugh, what's that mean? Who's the unchurched and who's the churched? I go, it's people. It's a kid who was relentlessly pursued and invited, and it took years for him to finally come around to understand that Jesus is the way. Don't worry, I didn't get emotional at the first service. I saved it for you. I wanted to find this, though, because I have found over my whole life, this sends people sideways. And I want to maybe graciously invite you to not be sent sideways with talking points. What does it mean when you say a church? To be a church, it's a community. That's all the church ever is. Our sign is such a problem. I like our sign, but I wish it said, building at 4750 South Surprise Way, home of East Wind Community Church. We are not this. We are this. So to be this, a community of people, so who's the unchurched? That's not a label like those people, like Peter. You don't know how, if you're not a follower of Jesus, you know how lucky you are that we made room for you today. That's not what we're talking about. It's about position. So there's a church, those are followers of Jesus in community, and that's not our community. But we're going to go check them out. We're going to see what it's like. We're going to walk in the door. We're going to participate. And I think about that, and that blows my mind. I go, that takes so much courage, I'll tell you, it's been a long time since I went to a church for the first time ever, or many of you have gone to a church after leaving because things happened. It takes a lot to walk back in those doors and go, is this going to be safe? What's going to happen here today? That's who we want to be, a church that unchurched people love. A community of people who follow Jesus, that people who are not in that community feel like we thought and expected that you might want to come see what's happening here. And that is some of your stories. I see some of you out there, that's straight up your story. I remember your first Sunday ever in church and how you were like, is there a concert today? What are the instruments doing on the stage? And then I got up and you're like, is it a TED Talk? You didn't know what to expect here all morning long. What we want to do is remove any unnecessary obstacle. Because there should only be, and let's be really clear, there should be an obstacle. His name is Jesus. He should be the only thing you trip over when you're trying to figure out, who am I? Who is God? It shouldn't be anything else. But Jesus, you will. It's called the cornerstone. You will trip over Jesus, and when you lay in that space, he'll meet you there, and you have to wrestle with, is he God? Is he the king, and does my life belong to him? And when you get up off the ground and you say yes to that, everything changes. So we want to remove everything else. We're not removing Jesus. He's the foundation. So how do we do that? We've got these 5 pillars. Here's our mission, inspire each other. Here's our vision to be a church that unchurched people feel welcome at. In a lot of ways, it's all just words, right? Here's the thing. We have experienced that following Jesus will make your life better and will make you better at life. Cue the second thing that people go, what's that mean? That sounds really feel good, right? I go, Jesus, let's just look at how Jesus says it. He says, the thief comes only to steal, to kill, and to destroy. And I have come that they may have life and have it to the full. Following Jesus makes you a better dad, mom, man, woman, boss, employee, student, coach, every area of your life. Because he has come that we might have life and have it to the full. So what does this, let's drill all the way down to what this practically means. It means this. It means this. We want guests to know that we know they're here, and we're happy about it. We're actually really glad. We're glad you're sitting in my seat. I'm glad. I have a big truck. No, I don't actually, but some of you have big trucks. You like to pull in and do the back end thing in the first section so you can zip right out, and sometimes someone gets your spot. We hope it's a guest. We hope they got your spot. Like we want our guests to know we're so glad you're here. So we have this little mandate. We want to assume guests are in the room. This is no different than probably what you do when you have company over. Like I doubt when you have company over, especially if you have boys living in your house, that you don't check the downstairs bathroom, right? I'm pretty sure you're like, someone's got to disinfect and clean that thing because our company might want to use it. And you probably put the dirty dishes, you deal with them. And you might even vacuum, and maybe you put all the shoes in the entryway, their closet, they're piled up and you throw them in there. You're not doing it because you're pretending. You're doing it because you want your guests to feel at home. You want them to feel like you knew they were coming. And you were super excited, so excited that you sanitized that toilet. That's our mandate. That's what it looks like for us. That's what we work at. In our messages, in our kids' rooms, at our door. We're not great at it. I mean, there's times when we're always trying to get better, to grow and to learn. But it's our heartbeat. And because there's something really beautiful in the line here. So Paul, we'll get more into Paul in the next couple weeks. He's writing to the church, the ecclesia in Rome, and he says this, don't you see how wonderfully kind, tolerant, and patient God is with you? Does this mean nothing to you? Can't you see that his kindness is intended to turn you from your sin? There's a movement that God invites us into, and part of that movement takes place in a space like this. Not always, but part of that movement. So if we review and kind of walk this road, we want to inspire each other to follow Jesus and deepen our faith and relationship with him. Just 3 things: inspire, follow, deepen. You should encounter that here. All right? The big way we want to go about that and do that is we want to be a church that unchurched love. Absolutely love. Like, and if they never get on, if you never decide that Jesus is, like, what can you expect from us? That we will show up every day to meet you one more time and love you unconditionally. That's the bottom line. And for us, there's the 5 pillars it looks like. So we're going to end by putting these pillars up. And I'd invite you to just think about them. Where do you fit in them? Have a conversation with God. Some of you, you're like, you live this and your why thinks that we're a healthy church. Your why. You show up and you live in these spaces. You serve on Sunday. You're here regularly. You're invested in life groups. You're finding other places behind the scenes. Your life is poured into this place. Others of you appreciate it. I want to invite the appreciators to consider that it might be time to move into partnership. To say, not only do I appreciate, I help build. This is my place too, because my sweat's in it. All right, maybe you're like, I showed up for the first time. I didn't expect the what's the football talk. I don't know what's going on here right now. Well, this is who we are. You got to see, like, you didn't have to wait around to find out, okay? So it's there for you. But we're going to just give you a moment to reflect. We're going to sing our closing song, and then I got a couple announcements to make.